Hello po, good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. We will be starting po in 2 minutes, so please sit tight. Thank you so much po for joining us. Okay po. Magandang hapon po ulit sa inyong lahat. Hello po sa mga Team Zoom and sa Team YouTube who are watching us via live stream. Hello din po sa lahat ng ating mga faculty from the different CUs. Thank you po for making time this afternoon for the continuation of our remote and interactive learning conversation series, this time on preparing how to teach STEM courses remotely. Okay po? We are recording this webinar so we can make it available on demand after our session. So just very quick reminders before we begin. Para po sa mga Team Zoom, all attendees are muted by default. This is important. Please use the Q&A panel or the Q&A button for all your questions so we can easily monitor them. Kindly use the chat box only for your greetings, comments, and participation in the interactive sessions. For Team YouTube, you may use the chat box to post your greetings, comments, and questions. Lo Grepo Halaw from the Interactive Learning Center Diliman will be monitoring YouTube, so she can relay your questions here during our Q&A. Okay po? Sige. So, with that, please help me welcome our invited speaker for this afternoon. She is a professor of science education under the Division of Curriculum and Instruction here in the College of Education, UP Diliman. So please welcome Dr. Cheryl Lynn C. Monterola. Hi, Ma'am Cher.
Hello po, good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar this afternoon. I'm going to share my insights regarding how to teach STEM courses remotely. But before anything else, I'd like to find out your thoughts about this particular question. What skills would you like your students to develop through your course? So to answer this question, please go to menti.com and then use the code 686619. So we're trying to build a word cloud regarding your thoughts about what skills would you like your students to develop through your course. So I'm going to give you a few minutes to answer this particular question. So again, the code is 686619. So let me shift to that menti.com. I'm going to stop sharing. And share what you're writing. So far, what we're seeing right now, the dominant skill that's evident in here in the word cloud is critical thinking. And then I'm seeing problem solving, analytical skills, collaboration, we already have 41, about 45 of you providing input to this particular question. So far we're seeing the dominant skills are basically critical thinking, problem solving, analytical, data analysis, laboratory techniques, collaboration. Let's keep them coming. Okay. A few more minutes, and then we can start. So at the heart of our word cloud is still critical thinking, followed by problem solving, laboratory techniques, analytical skills, data analysis. These are some of the skills that you'd like to prioritize as we go through this coming academic year. So this afternoon, let's try to answer the question, how do we foster critical thinking as we teach remotely during this coming academic year? So as I've said earlier, I'm going to share some insights about how to navigate the new normal, how to deliver STEM courses despite the current challenges that we're facing. So I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to pull up again my slide presentation, okay? So earlier we've seen in the word cloud that the dominant skills that we would like to develop for this coming academic year are basically critical thinking, analytical thinking, laboratory techniques, problem solving, which are of course expected because we are trying to deliver STEM courses from our field. So this afternoon, allow me to give some insights on the following topics. So these are the following topics that we would like to cover. So first, let's try to understand the current context. What's happening right now? What are the things that we need to consider as we plan for this coming academic year? Second is to understand how people learn. So we're going to talk about the science of learning. And then third, we'll talk about what matters in the future. So what skills will really be durable? What skills will really matter in the future? And are our thoughts synchronized or synergized with that idea? And then lastly, I'll talk about some tips, our additional tips for remote learning. So one consideration that we have to face right now is that the unemployment rate is the highest in several years. It's 17.7%. They are estimating that about 10 million workers have have been displaced by the pandemic. And so if we try to extend that idea, this job insecurity will really also impact our students and probably even some of our family members. Another consideration that we have to think about is regarding poor connectivity. PH has the lowest average internet speed in Asia Pacific. So it's about 5.5 Mbps. Probably for some of you who are fortunate to already have installed their or already subscribed to fiber connection even before the pandemic. So you're enjoying much higher or much faster connectivity compared to the others. But on the average, it's just 5.5 Mbps for us. There are also geographical differences in internet speed. So the UP system has several constituent units. So here we're seeing that the data reveals to us that the internet speed is fastest actually in NCR, but much lower in Visayas and Mindanao. So there are obvious geographical differences in internet speed. Another is that there's limited internet access. Only 67% of the population have internet access. And I'd like to also point out that there's an added cost for using internet at this particular point. So now we're working from home. Our students will have to also learn from home. And so we have to factor in the cost of internet usage. They're estimating that it's about 22.50 centavos for the cost of mobile internet per gigabyte. And if we're doing 1 hour of video for streaming, or let's say video needs, with just acceptable resolution, for example, that translates to about 0.6 gigabyte. And so when we calculate that, the usage is about 13 pesos and 50 centavos. I'd also like to point out that although about 60+% of the population have internet connection, have access to the internet, but the prevailing usage of the internet is more social than educational. So it's primarily used for social media and for entertainment streaming. So if we're trying to consider all of these factors, so we have to think about how do we plan our activities, our teaching activities this coming academic year, knowing all of this. Okay. So first, I'd like to say that we have to think about things differently this time. It's a new normal, and we have to face it. We have to adjust to the new way of doing things, new way of teaching, and of course also new way of learning. So how do we think about things differently? So in the next few slides, let me walk you through some of the insights regarding how to teach STEM courses remotely during this time. So first, let's try to revisit the comparison between synchronous and asynchronous sessions. So we know that synchronous session basically virtually you meet your students. At the same time, you are logged in, let's say in Zoom or in Google Meet. Asynchronous basically you're not working or interacting at the same time with your students. So there are some advantages of synchronous sessions as well as disadvantages of synchronous sessions. So first, for example, let's talk about synchronous sessions. So some advantages of synchronous sessions is basically is that there's immediate personal engagement between students and instructors or faculty members. And so there's immediate response to, let's say, some student queries. We can also try to respond immediately or react immediately to some clarifications or some corrections in the instructions that you're trying to give. And then another advantage is that there's actually more responsive exchanges between students and instructors. So because if you don't see one another, actually the challenge with virtual is that there are some some communication cues that are lost in the virtual world. But more so, if you don't really see your students, then you just most of the time you just give, for example, asynchronous activities, then more likely that you will not be able to get some or get a sense of some struggles or some let's say intentions of your students. So to be able to be more responsive about how you interact with your students, so synchronous sessions offer you that particular leverage. However, the disadvantage of synchronous session is that some students may face technical difficulties if connectivity is poor. So right now, for example, I'm trying to give this session, but my video is off, but because probably just to make sure that the presentation will not have a technical problem, or will be able to experience logging during this time. And then also I've mentioned about the high cost of internet. On the other hand, asynchronous sessions, the advantages of this mode is basically that there's higher level of temporal flexibility. So meaning to say, your students do not have to log in at the same time as you do. They can access the materials at their own pace, at their own time, and then students will have more time to engage with and explore course material. Especially, for example, for more complex ideas that they need, for example, to revisit. If, for example, you're delivering most of these complex ideas all the time asynchronous, for example, then students will have difficulty of trying to go over what you have said, for example. Unless, of course, you have recorded your lecture and have uploaded it together with the other course materials. Now, what are the disadvantages of asynchronous sessions? Students may feel disengaged and deprived of learning and psychosocial benefit from social interaction. The challenge of remote learning is that there's what you call physical distancing. But again, people naturally seek social connection. So synchronous sessions will be able to provide that to your students. But if most of the time you'll do asynchronous sessions, then that's what you call a psychosocial cost to your students, adverse effect on your students. And then another thing about another disadvantage of a synchronous session is that course material may be misunderstood without real-time interaction. And it may take some time for you to correct, for example, or address, for example, the concerns of your students. Unless, of course, you provide other channels for them to reach you beyond, for example, the UVLE, or beyond, for example, emailing. Okay, so these are just some concerns that we also have to consider. Another thing, this one is about online modalities. I have not presented here the what you call the offline and more leaning toward what you call printed materials, because probably that will be a challenge for us university faculty members, because if you're trying, unlike, for example, in basic education, that some of the teachers will print out their modules and send out to the students, there's a question of whether how will we get the resources for, let's say, printed materials that we would like to send to our students. Probably we can channel that concern also to the system, and probably there might be an answer about this with regards to sending, for example, documents or learning packages to our students, in case there are some students who would require, who would, let's say, prefer to have that mode. So here I'm showing some online modalities ranging from synchronous to asynchronous, and then traversing what you call instructor facilitated or resource facilitated activities. So as we can see, the more on the left side, and if you look at the upper left corner of the matrix, so you'll see that more instructor facilitated and more synchronous. Some of the examples there are tutoring, recitation sessions, having a webinar like this, or having a live lecture, and even doing what you call online problem sets, or let's say group review or group problem solving. On the opposite side, we have, for example, on the lower right corner, you have, for example, more asynchronous and more resource facilitated activities. So you have online problem sets, let's say exploration of new content, but this is done independently by the students. And then, of course, you have here individual study or practice. So let's talk about the science of remote learning. Two social as a senior research scientist from MIT published recently this what you call as the science of learning. Some considerations that we also have to think about as we try to plan for our courses this coming academic year. First, we need to think about, earlier we already talked about some conditions or some context that we need to factor in. And then we also talk about some online modalities already. Now we'd like to try to understand how learners understand new ideas. How do they actually um, acquire new ideas, make sense out of these new ideas as we try to introduce to them certain ideas, new ideas from our course. Another thing is how people retain information. So we have a semester long of different concepts, principles, and laws, and even laboratory techniques. How do our students, or how can our students retain information from all of the input that we provide to them? Another thing is that how learners apply knowledge and how do they build expertise? Because at the very end of our course, of course, we have certain goals that we need to attain despite the challenges that we're facing. And then also trying to factor in the motivation and learning, motivation of their students, their intentions, and even their learning regulation and some self-directedness. And then later on, we'll talk about from strategies for remote learning. So in the next few slides that I'm going to present, I'd like to talk about the science of learning and also cite some teaching strategies and some resources that might be tapped by by us as we try to deliver STEM courses this coming academic year. So I'd like to highlight three cognitive principles to talk about how people learn, no? So the science of learning. So first, I'd like to talk about this this cognitive principle. People learn new ideas by reference to ideas they already know. Second, new ideas that are meaningful, relevant, and timely tend to be more durable. Third, students strengthen understanding of ideas when they are actively engaged with content. So they may sound simply stated, but these have what you call neuroscientific underpinnings to our evidence to support these particular principles. So first, let's talk about the cognitive principle, people learning new ideas by reference to ideas they already know. So here, we'd like to encourage that in order for our students to easily learn new ideas that we introduce to them, we would like to encourage them to make connections about these new ideas and connecting these new ideas to other forms and let's say translating them to other representations. So one is of course the use of analogies. Being able to come up with an analogy means that a student, for example, is able to find some parallelism, some similarities between, let's say, two that may appear two seemingly different systems. But for an analogy to be established, students will have to point out similarities in the system, so some parallelisms. And if they're able to do that, then they are trying to connect the new learning to that of a previous or more familiar system or more familiar information. Another thing is what you call the use of multiple representations. When we talk about representations, there are several variations of that. It can be graphical in nature, so display of data, some graph, some visualization, some diagram, flowchart. Numerical, it can be in terms of sequences, calculation, some approximations. For physical, so it's manipulatives or some realia, models, okay? For verbal, it means being able to, let's say, translate it into a more simpler or into a much simpler form, for example, or to more understandable form. Or if for some, they're calling it laymanizing it, or if they're trying to explain it to a classmate, for example, so using more familiar words, but of course, capturing the essence of, let's say, a new concept. Another thing is what you call analytical, so making use of symbols, some functions, and some other variables to capture the new concept. So these are what you call examples or teaching strategies of being able to support this cognitive principle, people learning new ideas by referencing to ideas they already know. Another thing is the use of diverse modalities. So why is it important that the entire semester we do not just teach, for example, the course just using problem sets. So we have to try and inject diverse materials in our course because the more senses and the more modalities the students are exposed to, then the more that they're able to understand new concepts, new theories, new principles, and new laws that you're trying to introduce to them. Okay. So here's an example of some other diverse modalities and some other connections that you can leverage on in our classes. So New York Times, for example, has this particular feature called What's Going On in this graph. So you can search for some graphs that you can use just to, for example, find relevant information to your, let's say, topic, and then probably ask your students what's going on in this particular graph. So it's also sort of data interpretation, and at the same time trying to connect to more familiar information, the new topic that you're trying to introduce. Another source of this is what you call this website called Information is Beautiful. So there are other graphs and there are other data available here that you may want to integrate in your subject. Another way of, or another diverse modality that we can tap in our course is the use of videos. Of course, people are using YouTube, but there are, credible or sources and institutional channels in YouTube. So I'm giving us an example, MIT Digital Lab, and featuring different laboratory techniques. So some of the examples that you can see here of the videos available are volumetric techniques, titration, for example, and even some reaction workup. Another thing that you can tap is what you call the Journal of Visualized Experiment, or JOVE. I think there's an available trial for us for until August 21, but later on this needs subscription. So probably you may just want to try to navigate this, but I'm not really sure whether the campus or the university will be able to avail of this resource. Another thing that you can explore, there are a lot of podcasts. So these are just some examples. So here from science, on technology, that you have That Future. On engineering, for example, you have 99% Invisible. And then you have for mathematics, for example, Maths Appeal. There are also other podcasts on statistics even. Another modality that can be tapped is the use of virtual labs and simulations. Here, this is an example of a virtual lab developed by Stanford. It's called Digital Lab Twins. You can see on the left, this is the actual setup when the lights are actually on. And then on the right side, you can see that if the experiment is done and you see that if you, for example, played on the grating movement and the other parameters in the experiment, for example, then you'll be able to have some observations and some results. Here on the right side, you'll see when the lights are turned off, for example, that's the setup. And that's the diffraction or experiment results. Another source of virtual lab is LearnChemE for chemical and biological engineering. But at this point, there are some limitations in the available resources. Nevertheless, you might want to check whether in the next few months they'll be able to extend or add to this to the list of resources that they're providing. Also, MIT has what you call mathlets. So I'm just giving here one example, but there are other mathlets in the website. I have provided here the link. So you'll be able, students, when they go to this website, for example, they'll be able to change some parameters and look at the variations and look at the changes in the patterns, for example, or in the parameters of, or in the results of the, let's say, simulation. There's also what you call Lab Exchange developed by Harvard University. So here, these are actually collections of simulations, but there are also other collections of videos and other interactive media. So here, it shows several simulations on, let's say, running a protein gel, restriction enzyme digest. But most of the resources available here for the simulations are focused on biotechnology. You may, probably some of you are already familiar with Merlot. They have a lot of, they have a collection, a great collection of simulations and even virtual laboratories. Also, we have I think I have overwritten something. Star Cell Bio from MIT is also a good resource. For the second cognitive principle, new ideas that are meaningful, relevant, and timely tend to be more durable. Probably some of you have attended the SCRL talk webinars, and in the webinar, some of the faculty members they have shared that also from the College of Sciences and College of Engineering, they said that some of the things that they have done to adjust their courses last semester was that to connect, for example, the topics that they need to cover or to finish, for example, or some final requirements that they have to give, and connect these requirements to, let's say, the experiences of the students as we all navigate, for example, or the lockdown, hearing the news of the pandemic, let's say the rising cases and so on. So here I'm not giving a lot of examples because as it's still up to the teacher. You're the best judge of how to contextualize your topic, how to see some connections, because as an expert, you're in the better position to to look at those connections between the topics that you're discussing and the current situations that may be confounding your students. Connection and contextualization. And here I'd also like to point out another thing that we can explore. It's not that popular here in the Philippines, but elsewhere it's already done. What we call citizen science. So looking at own data from the Philippines, for example, and being able to gain insights from this data, and let's say how to find connection to this, let's say, information to some of the topics that are being discussed in your or being covered by your course. So just recently, the Philippine Space Agency has this. No, if you'd like to find to look at their data more closely, this is the link. So they have this COVID-19 space data. So some examples that some information that can be found are the following: traffic monitoring, some data about air quality, data about water quality, data about night lights. So again, this is an opportunity to do citizen science, find some connections about what they're supposed to learn in the course, and then connect it to the available data here in the Philippines. Also, some games. Although I have featured here some games that might be, more appropriate to younger learners, but I'm sorry, there are other games in these websites that you might find suitable to older students or university students that we have right now. So for example, Smithsonian Science Education Center and also MIT, this Schaller Teacher Education Program. The third cognitive principle is that students strengthen understanding of ideas when they are actively engaged with content. Earlier, I've talked about videos, but there's a way to, level up the way we use videos in class. And also, this can be done asynchronously, and this can also be done in collaboration with other students. So here, I'm introducing what you call video annotation. You can look at what you call the platform Video Ant. It was developed by the University of Minnesota, and it's actually a free platform. You can look for videos in YouTube. You can look for videos in other platforms or other sources, other search engines. But what you have to do is in this, for example, platform of Video Ant, you just copy the link of the video that you want your students to annotate. So for example, to give an example here, I have chosen aseptic technique. So I look for a video on this and then just put it here in the Video Ant. And then in the Video Ant, you can actually introduce some prompts or some questions to the students. And then these questions, so the students will be able to supply or provide their answers. So for example, for the timing 1 minute and 30 seconds, so 1 minute and 30 seconds into the video, so talking about the topic, let's say sterilizing techniques, I have provided here the question: what other information can be added to better understand a sterilizing procedure? So here, what I'm trying to demonstrate is that although it can be an ordinary video, students will passively, for example, just view the video, but because of the questions that you're trying to introduce in the video annotation, then you are leveling up the kind of thinking that you expect from your students. So here, you're trying to solicit some add-ons from your students regarding improving understanding on this particular technique, laboratory technique that's being presented. Another question that I have integrated here, for example, there's a portion of the video talking about transferring bacteria. So here, I have added the question: among those mentioned practices in transferring bacteria, which makes the most sense to you and why? So it may be a simple video, for example, but because of the question that you pose, it becomes a higher order thinking activity. So what really differentiates, let's say, an activity is the way we introduce some questions and pose these questions to our students. So, and then third example here, third question, for example, based on the video, this is the last question in this example, based on the video, what are important practices and procedures that are involved in performing aseptic techniques. So basically, this is talking about the main points, the key takeaways that students can get from the video. Again, in the video annotation, the students can respond and supply their answer. And then other students as well can react to previous answers. So it's some sort of discourse going on, even though you share this with your students, and then they can do it, they're doing it asynchronously. So it's very easy to use. So basically, so for example, I have created that particular task, and then what you do is to add new members. So you'll just have to paste the email addresses, for example, of your students, their contact details, so that they will be able to, let's say, access this particular video annotation task. You can have a collection of this. So just to give an example, so here I have created an account and just try to do at least two video annotation tasks. So one is the earlier that I've shown you on aseptic technique. The other one is on titration from a video I have chosen from MIT Digital Lab Techniques. Another way to do this, no, to support this cognitive principle, another higher order thinking task is what I call reverse problem solving. Nowadays, our students are able to access solution sets. They are able to access it from different sources. There's what you call Course Hero and so on. But what you can do is to still capitalize on this and do what you call reverse problem solving. Here, I'm citing a problem from Thornton and Marion on classical dynamics. Here, what we're trying to do is to ask our students to explain their solution. We are asking them to provide statements and connecting words to guide thought process evident in the solution. So here it's just basically a rundown of equations, but what's missing is basically the connections from the connection or statements or explanatory text from one set of equation to the next one until we have the final answer at the bottom. So or prior to the final answer at the bottom. So here it's a reverse problem solving. Normally we expect our students to provide the solutions to us. Here we're trying to provide the solution to them, but we're asking them to show to us their thought process regarding this by providing the explanatory text. Okay. Other examples under this cognitive principle, other teaching strategies. I have heard teachers when they were adjusting their requirements last semester, talking about providing raw data for analysis. So providing, for example, spreadsheets, photos, for example, of slides, and for example, other form of data that they have. So in the years that you have been handling the course, probably have accumulated some sample data and some mock data that you have, and this might be a good time for them to be used. Another thing for those classes with that involves, for example, that involve coding, so you can provide the codes and then plant plant errors in the codes and then ask the students to debug the codes. Another thing is sort of an alternate activity is to ask students to develop the metrics for a successful or excellent output. So knowing their thoughts about the expectations about, let's say, a certain output and what are the indicators that they are looking for. So this is some sort of a reverse work also, a reverse procedure. Another higher order thinking task that can be done is what you call digital storytelling. Probably you've heard so much about Hilary Andales, a student from Philippine Science, who's now a student in MIT. She won this Breakthrough Junior Challenge in 2017 because of this explanatory video on relativity. So this is what we call digital storytelling. So it can be some sort of requirement or activity in your class that can be pursued. So it's it's an explanatory media of a complex topic in your course. So students may, choose topics that they want to work on, and then provide explanatory media, either video or through podcast. So probably based on the resources that they have. Another thing is creating what you call wiki entry. A wiki entry, so again, for another complex topic that you want to determine whether your students have, have evidently, for example, learned the concepts, no? That's part of the topic. So you ask them to create, for example, a wiki entry. Another thing is what you call a live document. So a live document can be, a collection of resources that they have, and that then later on they have to, provide the link to you. And then as they progress, for example, in the course, they're going to add up to this, what you call, add more resources to this, what you call live document. Another thing is what you call archiving learning resources. Ask students to make an archive of resources that they have tapped that have guided them in their learning journey in the course. So here I'm presenting a free platform from Smithsonian. It's called Smithsonian Learning Laboratory. Students can create several collections of resources. It's like what you call Pinterest and sort of an Instagram. So it's some sort of a layout of what resources that they find are helpful in, for example, learning about the course. What's good about this kind of technique is that if you're able to encounter some of the resources that students found useful in during the semester, this might be, new resources that you might want to include in your as you implement your, let's say, same course, for example, in the following semesters. Another thing is in what you call introducing collaborative tasks in your class. So here, this is an example of a Padlet. It's some sort of an interactive whiteboard. Students can put on what you call sticky notes or some sort of digital post-its. They can also insert images. But what can be done here is that it can be both asynchronous and synchronous. So you provide the link to the Padlet, and then they can work on and then they can add up to this, add entries to this. The Padlet, however, is not entirely free. It's free trial for a month, but the rate for I think for 1 year for an educator, and then you can use several Padlets already, enroll several students to be able to use the Padlet. It's about, I think, 1,200 pesos in a year. Okay. And then the free version, Google has one, the Google Jamboard. This is also similar to this one. So they can students can interact and collaborate using the platform. So here I'm showing an example of an activity for an online design thinking that we use in the innovation workshop here in UP. Here I'm showing an invention algorithm, and the participants are asked to provide answers, to provide inputs using sticky notes, using some images also. So this one is an example of a Padlet. Now, earlier I have posed the question, what really matters in the future? So let's try to revisit some of the things that we have earlier written on, the skills that you want to develop in your students. So despite the difficulties that we're going to face, those are the skills that you don't, what you call non-negotiable. You really want to develop them. You want them, or you want your students to acquire those skills as they go through your course. So here I'm presenting what you call the MIT Human Skills Matrix, or the HSX. It's a list of 24 durable skills that they were able to determine from a series of workshops that they have done with industry people. They say that these are the 24 durable skills to thrive in today's rapidly evolving organizations. So what you're seeing here is basically that the skills are actually categorized into four, no? How we think, for example, how we interact, how we manage ourselves, and how we lead. So these are what you call durable skills. So even after university, these skills will really matter. And I also like to point out that a unique feature of this human skills matrix is the emphasis on literacy. So digital literacy, we're seeing right now that's very important. Civic and cultural literacy, as we try to um, go on with our lives and maintain being responsible citizens despite the persistent threat of the pandemic. And also organizational literacy for us, for example, as faculty members working with one another, although remotely. In the case of our students, being able to interact with, for example, classmates and still do, let's say, group work. So it matters. And even, of course, financial literacy, because there are costs attached to a lot of things. So some indicators of STEM skills that we want to revisit, because earlier I have pointed out that what really makes a difference in the resources that we give to our students is actually the kind of questions that we pose. So here I'm trying to bring light to some of the terms or the key terms or indicators when you think about the different STEM skills. So when you talk about analyzing, you can ask, for example, for students to talk about common features, to talk about even, or to talk about contrast or some differences. The idea of organizing them into types is basically part of analytical skill. Being able to detect patterns, being able to break apart or deconstruct, for example, an idea, being able to sequence them properly. So these are all of these are actually part and parcel of analyzing. Critical thinking. We always hear about this, but some keywords about critical thinking are the following: questions. So if for example, a manifestation of critical thinking is for your students to be able to pose questions. So let's say you prompt them or to ask questions about the topic. So instead of you always asking the question or you always posing the question, solicit questions from your student. So question posing is a very good indicator of critical thinking skill. Evaluating pros and cons, using logic, or providing argument, putting forward an argument, reasoning out. So being able to synthesize and being able to conclude, these are again part of critical thinking. Communicating. Communicating, there are a lot of avenues for this. Active listening is one. Use of visual, oral, and written methods. And then being able to engage different or diverse sets of audience. So for example, if you want your students to be able to laymanize some complex topics, so you ask them to translate it into to talk about it or translate it into a more understandable form. Okay. Investigating, part of investigating is being able to identify sources, reliable sources, credible sources, that developing search criteria or some queries, interrogating data. So for example, they're able, so earlier I've talked about giving a graph, for example, to student, or let's say giving a set of data to your students and being able to ask relevant questions with regards to the data. It's part also of investigating. And then designing and carrying out tests. Some courses would, would require testing of some ideas, testing of some designs, and asking your students to work on the different test procedures and expected processes involved. Again, they're actually related to what you call investigating skill. Decision making, clarifying logical choices, identifying likely impact, looking at evidence, looking at justification, substantiating some claims, for example. These are all part of decision making. And we've heard so much of creativity. Let's see, lateral thinking, being able to provide a lot of ideas, and being able to provide alternative ideas. They are part and parcel of creativity. Being able to make novel connections, taking acceptable risks, and even forming ideas iteratively, future proofing. So design thinking is very much part of this. So to give you more or other keywords on STEM skills, so I'm showing you a systems diagram of STEM skills. um, I have added other STEM skills like systems thinking. I've added here design thinking. So you'll see for design thinking, some words related to this particular skill are the following: empathy, understanding context, flexibility, ideation, prototyping, communicating, and then even optimization. They are part of what you call design thinking. For systems thinking, some words that we need to think about are the following. So whole part, so understanding of the part whole system, okay. um, interaction, looking at interconnection, looking at emergent properties, some patterns, looking at multiple perspectives and some influences, and even the boundaries and the nodes and the communities that are being formed. So all of these are part of what you call systems thinking. Critical thinking, I have mentioned some earlier, but here, giving counterexample is part of critical thinking. Giving interpretation, voicing out, for example, or expressing assumptions, and even justifications, they're all part of critical thinking. Now, for complex problem solving, very much related to other STEM skills. So you have multi-step, multi-dimensional problems, and then providing solutions to these multi-step or multi-dimensional problems. But I'd also like to highlight some of probably what you call non-cognitive STEM skills, which are very much important today. So I'm pointing out resilience. So here, grit, agility, regulation, recovery. Part of this also is persistence, endurance, and even optimism, and the ability to reframe because of the different uh, experiences that we're dealing right now. We're dealing with right now. So another thing here is part of STEM skill is digital literacy. So we have seen a lot of digital resources. But again, part of being able to thrive in this new setup is that how to optimize the use of the digital resources available. Uh, Probably we are a bit overwhelmed already because there are a lot of digital resources out there, but managing how we choose what will be relevant to our course, for example. At the same time, also considering what will be comfortable for us to try out, because we also have to trim down some of the resources that we want to include in our course. So it's really a matter of choosing or selecting which ones will really matter in your course, which ones you're very much comfortable introducing or using to your class. Some other things that I'd like to introduce. Earlier, I've talked about higher order thinking tasks. Harvard Graduate School of Education has what you call Project Zero. They have what you call a thinking routine toolbox. So here there are a lot of different kinds of um, thinking routines that are being that can be explored and that can be contextualized in your course. So there are, for example, thinking activities about possibilities and analogies, perspectives, controversies, and dilemmas, digging deeper into ideas, synthesizing and exploring ideas, and even introducing and exploring ideas. So to give you an example of this thinking routine toolbox, so in the digging deeper into ideas, there are several activities that can be done. These are some of the names. So values, identities, actions. See, think, me, we. Okay. Who am I? Layers, projecting across time. So there are a lot of thinking activities that are under digging deeper into ideas. As I've said, this is a complete toolbox. There are a lot of thinking activities. So I'm just to give you an example on claim support question. This is a routine for reasoning with evidence. So make a claim about the topic, identify support for your claim, ask a question related to your claim. Probably you might find some of the ways, uh, the way questions are framed, very simple. But again, to the best of your judgment, you'll be able to level it up a little bit. Of course, you know your students very well, so you know how to recast these questions to suit your audience. At any rate, this is a good example of how to do claim support and question. It's a thinking routine for reasoning with evidence. Now, some other teaching tips prior to doing the webinar, there are a lot of questions about assessments. So first off, I'd like to talk about prioritizing formative assessments over summative assessment during this time. Earlier, I have mentioned that we have to think differently at this time. So it's not really the previous way of doing assessments. Like in our STEM courses, we do a lot of problem sets. We do a lot of long exams in the entire semester. But things have to be different this time. And I think it's a good time also for us to explore these possibilities and see whether these are really worth pursuing, whether we are actually developing durable skills in our students using these new methods. So regarding assessment, I'd like to say that more low or no stakes assessments. So there are already a lot of what you call concept tests available. There's a collection on mathematics, on calculus, on statistics. Later on, probably I'm going to provide those the link to those resources, and then you can tap them. And if, for example, your problem is in terms of the way the questions are being phrased, probably you can recast those questions or contextualize them. But there are already a lot of concept tests. Concept tests were initially developed by Eric Mazur of Harvard University when he first introduced what you call peer instruction. So these are basically collections of multiple choice questions. So again, this is more of formative assessment if you give them more often, and as you try to also track down the progress, the learning progress of your students. And this is much better because if you're worried that how do you try to proctor, for example, a long exam given the new setup, okay? Another way of assessing learning, another way of gathering evidence of learning is to encourage presentations or demos. But the drawback to this one is that it has to be done, for example, synchronously. So some sort of, let's say, an oral exam. But if, for example, you're more after the evidence of learning, Then again, the explanatory videos, the video tutorials that they can, for example, develop can be part of providing evidence of learning. Another thing for assessments in our course, STEM courses, is to implement honor code statement. I'm going to show an example later on. With the honor code statement, they say that it's sort of discourages cheating if you're really worried about that. Um, for some teachers, probably you might opt to do it at the very start of of the semester, having a honor code statement, or periodically if you have high stake, for example, assessment or more summative forms of assessment, then you have to again bring back this honor code statement and give this to your students and have them sign this one. Another way to, for example, discourage cheating, if you really want to have what you call summative assessments, basically to randomize question assignments. So you have what you call a test bank. And then for this test bank, they may, for example, 3 or 4 questions assess the same set of skill, but you assign these questions to different students so that they will not be able to compare notes or send out um, notes or let's say answers to their fellow classmates. Try open book and no internet exam. So if you really want to do a summative exam, and then what you can do is an open book exam. So the meaning to say questions are much more difficult and much more of the higher order level compared to, let's say, sit down exams that we normally do in the previous semesters. So again, talking about no internet exam, so they're not allowed to browse the web while taking the exam, and this will prevent them from looking for some resources that can help them answer the exam. So here's an example of an honor code statement. So will not communicate during the exam period with any person by any means, including voice, text, or file sharing. I will not post any solution materials where they are accessible to other students during the exam period. So this is just an example of an honor code statement for, let's say, an assessment, an exam. Some examples or some other tips regarding board work, especially for courses with a lot of calculations. I, for one, I'm not really a fan of, PowerPoint for equations because in education, we say that if you write, you learn more because as you write, we call it, you metacogitate. So there are a lot of benefits that they have found when students are able to write and not just type or just look at a PowerPoint, for example. So for because as you, for example, try to also solve some previously when we're doing it face to face, you try to solve problems on the board, you write down the solution step by step, and as they unfold to the eyes of your students, and then as they also try to copy the notes while writing, there's what you call brain activity that's going on, and it will be helpful for the students, especially for those with who are more, let's say, visual learners who are able to recall information such as that. But because of the new setup, remote mode, and we want to do, for example, board work, you want to all still do a step-by-step presentation of a solution, then you can use what you call sort of an electronic board work. You can use Zoom and then connect an iPad or actually a tablet with a stylus. And then as you write down the equation, it's being flashed or being shared to the students. You may want to record it. So let's say for students also to still access the video asynchronously or off. And then you can also use Zoom and then an overhead camera. So for example, your phone can be used like an overhead camera. But again, you have to attach your phone to your laptop or to your desktop to be able to share via Zoom. Um, for those who are, for example, dealing with large classes, here's a case study done in MIT. It's called Cat Soup. They have used this for some courses with large enrollment. It's basically an automatic grading system for, let's say, even problem sets. So they have used this and they have reported that it worked well. They have used this with 3,000 students at the time that it was being used. So for those of you who are more familiar with Python, because it will be needed in this one. So it's called Cat Soup. It's an automatic grading system for problem sets. Okay. So in summary, what I have walked you through this afternoon and shared some insights about are how the science of learning, knowing about how our students learn, how do they retain information, and what will make what you call durable learning to them. I also talked about what matters in the future, talking about STEM skills in general, the indicators for STEM skills, and how can we develop these STEM skills despite the current constraints. So I've overemphasized already that the way we question, the way we pose questions is basically the key to that. It's integral to developing these STEM skills. Still really up to our expertise, how we frame questions that we can really develop higher order thinking skills among our students. Some other tips for remote learning on assessment. I would like to reiterate that we prioritize formative assessment over summative assessment during this time that we are doing remote delivery of our STEM courses. So with that, I would like to end my presentation with this simple encouragement, no, for us to thrive and not just survive despite the challenges that we are facing. So again, a sun tower is a very good symbol of that. In UP, it's a good symbol also for us. So let us strive and not just survive this coming academic year. So thank you very much. This ends my presentation. I'm ready to answer your questions.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Cher. Okay, I think we have a lot of questions already. And please keep them coming. Sa mga nasa YouTube po, we are monitoring the YouTube chat box. Siguro, Ma'am Cher, maybe we can start with something more siguro philosophical muna before we go into the specifics, no, of your presentation. So si Sir Benny Pacheco may question siya on what are your thoughts about the fundamental difference between teaching STEM compared to other strands or tracks, no? So I think meron ding nag-comment kanina dun sa chat box about yung lab courses and a lot of skills-based courses na parang ang hirap nilang ituro during this time. So I don't know, what are your thoughts about?
Yeah, opo. So the fundamental difference probably is that primarily STEM courses are very much having to hands-on activities. It's very much experiential. Some lab techniques, although we have virtual laboratories, for example, but the dexterity to handle laboratory equipment will be compromised if students are not able to handle really realia or actual equipment, actual laboratory apparatus or tools. So these are the things that will be sort of have to be followed up later on when things have settled and students will have to return to the lab. We expose them to virtual laboratories this time. We ask them about how they think about the different laboratory techniques, but it will still be different to do it in an actual setting. So probably we have to prepare for, let's say, the succeeding courses wherein the students will have to take the prerequisite course via remote mode. And then in the following semester, for example, when there will be face-to-face classes, there should be some sort of, revisiting of this lab techniques when students, when the semester is starting. So because again, the dexterity in handling the equipment is still a different thing. So they still have to demonstrate proper handling of equipment and so on. And it's a bit limited in virtual mode. Mm-hmm.
As a follow-up din, Ma'am Cher, may tanong dun sa chat box si Professor Braga. What about content that might not be met given the limited number of class hours? So catch up pa rin
It's really
talaga.
still ma'am, regarding the content, actually at the onset of the semester, we really decide on what will really matter, what is essential for this particular course. Also looking ahead at what will be the prerequisite skills that, or what will be the skills that will bridge this course to the next higher course, or let's say to the other courses within the discipline. And so if these are the essential skills, then we really have to think of ways how to develop them through the activities that we're going to embed in our course pack. So probably you have to think of activities that are connected at the same time. It's just one activity, for example, but the activity is able to address several competencies or several skills already. So it's really a question of as an expert, as you really know, as how you know your course and how the discipline, for example, really needs the set of skills. So it's really up to you to define the parameters of the content and the activities that you're going to use in your course pack.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Cher. Sige, if you don't mind, punta na tayo dun sa specifics of the strategies that you presented. So there is a question about, parang there are two related questions. So isa si kay Professor Dancel, tapos yung isa ay nanggaling sa question from YouTube. Related sila to engagement, no? So si Professor Dancel, ang question niya, how do you measure asynchronous engagement? Or yung idea ng, can you actually engage students with an LMS? No? And then siguro, baka connected na doon, Ma'am, share yung question sa YouTube na, ano yung mga different types of interactive activities that we can provide our students para rin yung social emotional development nila ay ma-address din. Yeah.
Earlier, I've shown you what you call the video annotation. Actually, the discourse there is some sort of a measure of interaction or engagement of the students. There are certain, so there are also additional tips on that. For example, you give an instruction on, please give at least, let's say, please give a comment to 2 or 3 responses of your classmates. So it's, although you are annotating the video yourself, for example, so you are supplying your own answer as a student, but if, for example, the students also, as an additional instruction, please respond or react to other answers. So again, that adds a measure of engagement if they're able to follow that in the it's like some sort of a discussion forum already, or reaction to one another's ideas. The other thing is about, sorry sir,
about assessment yon, Ma'am Cher. Parang how do we, kasi parang, actually, thank you for the suggestion dun sa video annotation. I thought that was, parang maganda siyang subukan sa mga klase. But how do we assess that? May suggestion ka ba on, like, creating rubrics, or is there anything else that they can submit
yes,
apart from what they posted in the annotation?
Yeah. For example, because you already designed the question, and some sort you can provide some sort of a scoring system based on the keywords that you'd like to find out. Because before inserting the question to the video, you have already reviewed the video, and in your mind you already have some relevant questions and some possible corresponding answers. But of course, these are these are some sort of short answer questions. So meaning to say there can be a variety of questions that will be provided by the students. So you have to just write the keywords, and whether if you see these keywords, what points are you going to assign to these answers. And then you give them time to do it. So for example, set a deadline. When do you expect them to when do you expect for them to annotate the video? My graduate student actually did it in senior high school. My thesis advisor did it in senior high school, and it was very successful. It developed learning outcomes in genetics and also reflective thinking of the students. Mm-hmm.
And then we also have a question, Ma'am Cher, ito on your thoughts about this activity. So baka meron kang masasuggest na, baka you can tell us a little bit more about why this will work. Sorry?
Sorry po, sorry, sir. Go ahead po, sorry.
Yeah, just in case you can tell us ano yung educational principles behind an activity they call meme creation. So tanong to ni Professor Simon, sabi niya, in this activity, students are asked to create a meme and share it online through Twitter or Facebook with a certain hashtag. What is your take with this activity?
It's for some probably students, they can relate to it because it's common among the generation next, and they will find it fun in a way. What's the principle? Because the mere fact of being able to create a meme and find a suitable meme for something that you're thinking about, let's say the hashtag, is again an indication of the thinking or the thought process of the student. But what you can do is to, in let's say 5 sentences, provide an explanation. How does this meme relate to our topic? Because you always have to again pull it back to your topic. So you do not just give them, fun activities without relevance to the current topic. So I have seen a lot of this. Even it's part of what you call alternative thinking to or lateral thinking. Being able to, provide examples that probably for some will be out of this world, but for you to be able to find the connections and being able to communicate it clearly is a good skill, no? Ayun po.
Thank you po. Before po we proceed with some of your questions, we'd like to remind you po that in case you would like to receive a certificate for your participation for this webinar, nakapost po yung ating link to the evaluation form sa Zoom chat box at saka sa YouTube chat box. It's bit.ly/RILC STEM webinar. Okay. Sige, mag-proceed po tayo, Ma'am Sheridan, sa ibang mga questions. Thank you po for all the learning resources that you shared. No, meron pong specific question about whether they will work on cell phones and tablets?
Yes po. For some of those platforms po, they can work on cell phone po and even tablet. So I think it's just smaller in terms of screen, but they can still work naman po. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ito po mukhang concern po to for basic ed, sabi po ni Gian Soriano. Regarding the use of the honor code system kapag elementary, could the students countersign it or not necessarily? Because tama ba, Ma'am Cher, kapag itong adults na, we ask them to sign?
Apo.
Mm-hmm.
Apo. For minors po, kailangan ng parent na confirmation. Apo. And then you have for our faculty members dealing with basic ed, you have to soften it a bit. So it's not the one that I have given as an example. It should have to be it has to be rephrased for younger students. Ayan po. And then they have to have a guardian sign it for them. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Ma'am.
Some sort of a learning contract, not just with a learning agreement, not just with your student, but also with the parents of your students po.
Okay, thank you. Ito, Ma'am Cher, meron lang gusto i-share si Brian Alamani about, I think more on the idea of how do we equip the students with the necessary lab skills. So may insight siya from IChem EUK. may ilang university daw sa UK in the field of Chem-Eng na kasama sa setup ang socially distanced laboratories. Dahil nga, yung, kaya nang nabanggit mo rin, may experiential component sa engineering education na hindi talaga kaya ng virtual learning. Kailangan magkaroon ng adjustment ang program to be flexible in this kind of setup. I think, Ma'am, shared sa mga meeting natin sa system committee, napapag-usapan naman yung if the situation permits,
Opo.
parang, and also if the setup of the laboratory permits, the faculty or the unit can actually explore this, no? Kasi nga hindi talaga kaya yung walang ganong component. Pero hanggang maaari, we try to push it back either last part of the SEM or next SEM na.
Opo. Opo. Pero very ano po, because of the rising yung rising cases, no? So if ever that will be probably next semester na po, and if ever man we have to be cautious, no, when we return. It's better to be on the safe side, and then yung physical distancing, and then probably what we have to plan next is the catching up, really some sort of the bridging component. It has to be probably some sort of they call it after school, no? If later on we have what you call face-to-face already, and then the students will be here in the campus, but they have to attend to some sort of catch up, and probably this can be an after school sort of activity. Probably some TAs or lab technicians will be able to assist them in this, but it has to be scheduled. Because, for example, if you're afraid that it will really disrupt your succeeding courses, so that can be something that we can explore.
Share, so ibig sabihin ang immediate concern natin ngayon ay maitawid yung remote learning for first SEM for whatever competencies we can address, and then ang susunod nating babakahin ay yung catch up ng second SEM at saka ng mid-year. Parang ganun yung mangyayari.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Opo.
Sige po, maybe we have time for two more questions. So again, may question din po dito si Sir Benny Pacheco about independent learning. So tama po no, yun na yung message ay itong remote learning, kaya siyang magawa kahit students and faculty are away apart at students can work on their tasks independently, no? So meron po bang kayong example daw ng personalized system of instruction or Keller plans for STEM courses? Or kahit po siguro suggestion on how to ensure that students can learn independently during this time?
First, I'm not sure whether because for some project management tools, there's what you call Trello, for example. But again, that's veering away from the OVLE that we have, the current system that we have. Probably some sort of I have heard of what you call some sort of a blog, but it's more of documenting the progress of the student. And then if, for example, this link is for sent to you, or probably another live document can be done, then you will be able to monitor the progress of the student, and probably learn more about the kinds of prior knowledge that the student already has. Kasi it will really matter in terms of personalizing it some more, because probably for some, they're already advanced in terms of the other materials, so they just have to do away with it. But because of the, let's say, grading requirement, then they have to go through it. And then in terms of, ensuring that they will independently learn, because it's really a skill of the future. So being self-directed, having the initiative is a skill of the future. So students really, as early as now, they really have to learn it, find some ways to, if, for example, they're dealing with difficult topics, and if they think that the resources provided are not enough, but they need to learn some more about it, being able to initiate ways of knowing, and then also managing themselves. These are skills that are very important in the future. So independent learning, I think this is a good experiment already for all of us, even for the younger students. Opo.
Ma'am Cher, last question. I hope you don't mind.
Opo.
So this one is from Alexis Almocera. By any chance, are you familiar though with just-in-time
Yes, just-in-time
teaching?
teaching.
Yes,
Opo,
opo. So
just-in-time.
ang tanong niya ay, kahit siguro one example, I think you shared
Okay.
a lot of
Ay,
suggestions already. Pero ito daw for a skills-based math course. I wonder
ay,
if just-in-time will work for skills-based
just-in-time
math
teaching
course.
po, normally, yung just-in-time teaching, you do it for, let's say, a synchronous course. So meron kang synchronous session. You're going to have parang, so everybody will log in. But you will send them, for example, a set of questions. So I can provide it to all. There are a lot of collections already of concept tests. So multiple choice questions. So students can easily answer them. Just for also for the teacher to be able to understand where the students are coming from, what's the prior knowledge, what's the starting point or the baseline. So that's why they call it just in time. So and then you sort of adjust the content if it's still possible, or you'll know what um, topics to highlight some more because you think that students are struggling because of the answers that they have sent to you. So yun po. There, I will provide the link. The SCRL po, the system committee, already has this what you call repository or of curated online resources. All the materials that I have presented here, I will put the link there so that the faculty members will be able to access po. I have some collections of concept tests, physics, math, calculus, and statistics, and even chemistry and biology. So I'm going to put there in the resources po.
That is great. So i-remind lang po natin yung may website po ang UP System Committee on Remote Learning. And I don't know, it's already available, no, Ma'am Cher? Yung
Opo,
website.
yata. Sorry, hindi ko lang po matandaan yung, I cannot
Pero ano,
remember the link, but yes
sige.
po, opo.
We'll look for it and we'll share. Pero may question din kanina sa Q&A about curated resources and parang a team is already curating some of the resources and sharing them on this website. No? Ma'am Cher,
Opo,
last
opo.
in case they want to, okay lang ba? In case they want to reach out
Opo,
to
opo.
you, they have questions,
Opo.
what's the best way to reach out to you?
Ano po, you may email me. Sorry, I wasn't able to put my email, but I'm going to write it in the chat box po. My email address is sc monterola@up.edu.ph.
Okay. Thank you, Ma'am Cher. So nasa chat box na po, scmonterola@up.edu.ph. At si Christian Arans po shared the remote learning website prepared by the UP System Committee on Remote Learning. Thank you so much, Christian. Ma'am Cher, thank you so much. Alam namin na sobrang busy ninyo ngayon sa EDUC. Maraming salamat. Any final words before we say goodbye?
Thank you very much po for having me. Again, those are just some insights po. They are not prescriptive. It's still up to you. You're the best decision maker po in terms of your course because you're the expert po. You'll in a better position to look at connections and contextualization. So some insights lang po. I hope that you're able to use it po in the coming semester. So let's all thrive and not just survive. So yun po yung pinaka-message natin. Thank you so much.
Tapos, Ma'am Cher, tama, no, we can share a soft copy of your presentation. Yes, so
yes, sir. I will email pa the soft copy.
Okay. And then final reminder po about our evaluation form para makuha din po namin yung email ads ninyo kung saan namin ipapadala yung soft copy ng presentation ni Ma'am Cher at yung recording po of this webinar that you can share with your colleagues. Okay, maraming salamat po ulit. Have a pleasant afternoon. Abangan nyo po, ang ating next webinar will be next Thursday. That one will be about assessment, featuring teacher Grace Reo Perez, still from the College of Education. So we look forward po to having you there. Thank you po for your support and good luck with your course preps. Bye. Thanks, Ma'am Cher.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daisy, and thank you, Lo, for all your help. as always. Thank you po to all our participants.